Right, just gonna get Lenny in the chat. Very excited for today's conversation. Thank you to everyone who marked this off on your calendar. We appreciate you taking time. In Canada, it's that long weekend. So, it kind of just worked out perfect timing, hoping that everyone is around, more present than they might be on a typical weekend, get a little more time to tune in and just take things slow. So, yeah, so just sit tight. We're just waiting for Lenny, and then we'll get going in today's conversation. I know wellness and mental health, usually those are topics that we don't necessarily talk about all that openly and freely. So, I think it's real important that we're going to be open and vulnerable today, talk about this and, some practical things, some ways that we find, in everyday life. We work on our wellness practices and the different things that maybe have been challenges to us from before that we've overcome. We just hope that you see yourself in this conversation. It's very much the way that we try to do things, right? We try to do it open, honest, vulnerable, different. So we're just waiting for Lenny to jump on here. Having a little challenge there connecting.
Oops.
My brother, how are you?
How's it going, man?
Good. How you doing?
Good. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties just now.
No worries, man.
What's new with you, man? How's it going?
It's going well, man. Coming to you from Costa Rica, and I'm super excited. It's real different, man. I've got some mango beside me right now,
Okay.
and it's interesting. The mango actually tastes like mango.
Yeah,
So
it's actually real stuff out there, right?
I think so. I think so, man. I don't think this was grown in a lab, so super grateful for that.
Nice, man.
How's your
Nice.
morning been treating you so far?
It's been good. To your audience and to mine. I guess I'll just do a quick intro for myself before we
Yeah.
go into it. So, yeah, my name's Lenny Rampersad. I'm based out of Philadelphia. I've done work in activism all around Philly, virtually online with Aaliyah out in New York, who is another huge activist, and she's kind of making an impact and a difference in many different areas in society, and she's actually taken it upon herself to make it her career now. So
Fantastic.
yeah,
Wow.
it's pretty cool how like we started and how we've evolved over time. And I still do work with DEI and anything like any support I can do. And I think that's why it stimulated me to just say, hey, Josh, like, let's talk more about what's going on here. I saw your post about Guyanese men, and I don't think anyone's ever posted something like that, when it comes to wellness and talking about therapy, being vulnerable. So that's why I wanted to get you on here and like just kind of talk more about it. So yeah, do you want to I don't know if you did an intro
No.
for yourself.
No, yeah,
Okay.
I was ready to jump on, man. But thank you for that intro. And something that really stood out to me about you, man. Like for everyone who's on here, we've never actually met in
Yeah.
person. We are very much one of those Instagram connections. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it was probably around 2021-ish, probably somewhere around then when we first
Yes.
connected.
Yeah.
And I think we did a live then as well, focused around mental health and especially men, trying to spotlight that a little bit. So I appreciate you, man. I see you out there. I see you doing your thing, living life, and you're still trying to find a way to, as you're living and learning, bring it back to the people, the community,
Yeah.
right? And share this knowledge. I really appreciate how you do that, and you do it so confidently, and you don't
Awesome.
mind putting yourself at the forefront, so, like facilitating conversations like this. Even as I was writing our caption for the post, letting people know that we're having this conversation, like I can't tell you, I was beaming with pride. It's like, wow, a Guyanese man reached out to me for us to talk about wellness. You know what I mean? And it's
It
like,
never
wow,
happens.
never. I haven't seen that. I haven't even seen that written in a script anywhere. You know what I mean? So it felt so good, man. So thank you so much for the opportunity to do this again with you
Sure.
and for us to keep growing as two humans trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? So thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely, man.
yeah, so for those who don't know me, I'm kind of at this point. My name is Josh. I'm 36 and currently out in Costa Rica. And, I was based in Toronto my whole life, right? Last year, we kind of felt the crunch of everything and we just made some decisions that were for our highest good. And we decided to sell everything and travel the world. And the purpose of that was really to see how other people live, and to see where else feels like our next home, right? We really wanted to have more of an aligned, just overall environment and ecosystem for ourselves. So we set out in search of that, did a whole bunch of traveling. And right now, Costa Rica feels like a good fit. So that's why we're here. And in this sort of transition phase of my life, if you will, I've been able to step more into healing in color. And Lenny, I know you're familiar with healing in color. That is the wellness space that my wife Sukhi and we created, and we had that out in Innisfil, Ontario. So with that, we were really trying to offer different services for people, right? And so she leads with the counseling and Reiki and hosting community retreats, things of that nature. And so, as we were in that space, I was also in service. So I would be co-hosting some of those retreats. I would also have coaching going on, different things like that. But because I was still tied into my corporate space, I couldn't really be all in. You know what I mean? I found myself like, damn, okay, one more Excel sheet, and then I can get over to the yurt and we can start planning something. So I found myself very much like that. So now, thankfully, I left the corporate life behind and I said, I'm all in with this because I feel being in service is what actually sets my soul on fire. So, right now, we're really expanding our services, but the last year or so has been about learning and bringing new things to the forefront, right? New ways to heal and live and just thrive in life. So, right now, some of the things people might see me doing is Soul Flow Radio. It's a new podcast that I put out with one of my brothers, and we do that weekly. I'm also a tarot card reader. Self mastery consulting is something that I've leaned into heavily, and that's because I've been in several leadership positions throughout my career and just in different spaces within the community. And I've seen the need for us to really work on that self leadership before we start figuring out how to lead others, right? And that really breaks it down and brings it back to ourselves, right? So we can compassionately examine ourselves and the different habits and things that we do to equip ourselves for success. On top of that, sound healing. We actually learned about sound healing out in Thailand. So bringing all of these new and different practices to ourselves and our people, right? And the interesting thing about it is as we do this, the more it seems like this is not so much introducing something to our people. This is actually a reminder to our people
Mm.
of things that we used to do. Right. We used to sit around campfires and play instruments and talk and have elders who pull us aside and let's go for a walk. Let's do this. You know what I mean? Like it's bringing it back to those practices that really truly help us to feel rooted and purpose driven and fulfilled in life. Right. So a lot of that is what this work is about right now. A lot of other projects going on. I'm also a 3 times published author. So, always looking for different ways, different creative outlets for us to really hammer home these messages of, we're all a lot more similar than we are different, and sometimes approaching things in a different way through a new lens, practice, whatever it happens to be, is the way we're actually going to push things forward. So that's very much me kind of in a nutshell and, what I'm about and what I try to bring to every table I sit at.
I, I love what you said, how this isn't something new. This is just a reminder of what our ancestors used to do, and this is how they lived. And I think over time, we with technology, social media, all the different distractions that we have now, I think we've lost a lot of that. And in essence, you lose a sense of community. You lose a sense of that support that you get
Yeah,
from that community. And now we have to
absolutely.
find ways to find better ways of outreach.
Absolutely.
So yeah, man, with that being said, so the main topic I wanted to focus on with is men's wellness. So like for me that could mean so many things, and I just wanted to kind of either break down what are the components of it, what does it mean, like does it have to be all encompassing, or is it focusing on one area depending on the person? Like what is the definition of wellness for men?
Absolutely. And before we dive into that, if you don't mind, I would love if we did something together.
Yeah.
Why don't we set an intention for what we're hoping the people who are tuning in, and as much as it's for them, it's for us as well, right?
Mhm.
So, what's our intention by time this conversation concludes? Do you have an intention that you're hoping for that really reaches
Yeah,
people?
I would say I want to be able to take away what is men's wellness, like what does it mean? I haven't done much research on this stuff. I'm not really well versed in it, obviously. Like I know you're the expert, so that's
Appreciate it.
probably one thing. And the other thing is like why why is it that men struggle with this? You know,
Okay.
what
Yeah.
with this area? Like, is there a stigma? Like, why don't we do this more often? I feel like, I don't know, I feel like it's just kind of, I don't know if it's the part of like the masculine journey that we
Mhm.
feel like we have to like just take everything upon ourselves, but I just want more clarity on what it means, what it is, and why why this is such a big topic for men, you know?
Okay. I love that, man. Thank you. I appreciate you coming forward with that intention. And I echo that. I think it's really important for us to have an open and vulnerable conversation around that. And, I hope that my intention behind this, to build on what you said there, is I just hope that people can maybe pick out a few different things that maybe they haven't heard of or maybe need reminders of, right, from this conversation. I never want it to be a scale or a spectrum, if you will, where people feel like there's something that's better or worse. You know what I mean? That's why I really lean into the whole mantra of let's try different, right? Because different kind of keeps everything on the same plane, if you will, right? It's just about us exploring other things and allowing multiple things to be true at the same time. So I think we're gonna have a great one, man. So, to your first question, you were asking around wellness and kind of what it means to me, or kind of like how to define it. But how do you want to talk? What's the first question you want to go
It
into?
it doesn't, for me, like, how do you view it? Like, maybe is there a formal definition of it?
Sure.
Is there is there a general kind of, I don't know how to explain it, just what it is
Yeah, no
out
doubt.
there. But if there is, then what is that? If there isn't, then what is your take on it? You know?
For sure, for sure. And these definitions that are, what we share today, of course, these are our very personalized definitions,
Hmm.
things based on our lived experience, right? So this is not to say they're all encompassing, but this is kind of just a way that I think we can break it down so we can really think about it and go inward with them a little bit more easily, right? Now, I'm not going to be one of those who uses all the buzzwords. I'm not looking for, all of that kind of stuff. I'm not one of those guys. You know what I mean? I really want to keep it raw, authentic, and honest. We did not rehearse our answers to any of this stuff. This is very much coming from the heart and our experiences. So just want to put that out there. So, for when it comes to wellness, right, the way I see it is it's kind of like the overall package of how we take care of our mental, emotional, and, physical health, right? So, for example, we might think that going to the gym is taking care of our wellness, right? That might be how we think about, hey, when someone brings up the word wellness, that's what comes to mind, right? Yeah, hey, that's definitely part of it, right? Some of us might think, oh man, I treat myself to a haircut every 3 weeks. That's wellness. I'm taking care of myself, bro. You're right. That is part of wellness. But I think that what happens, especially as men, is we sometimes get out of balance in terms of all the different things we need to factor in when we're thinking about wellness, right? So, in one definition, I've seen it broken down into 5 components, right? And I want to share this with you and everyone who's listening. The first component is really physical health, right? So, many of us do this pretty well, right? We have a routine. It's like, yeah, Thursday is arms day, and, Friday is arms day, and Saturday is also arms day, right? We're very good when it comes to this physical exertion, most of the time, right? That's kind of just programmed into us. We just think it's part of our existence, right? We're supposed to do that. But, a lot of this too, in my opinion, comes from us being proactive, right? Thinking, about, down the line, okay, well, I'm my father's son. So what is my dad dealing with now? Right? What do I need to be mindful of when I'm doing all of this, taking care of my body? Right? And it comes to more than just our body, right? Like it's about, sure, movement and getting the energy that might be stuck within our body flowing, right? Because oftentimes that's a source of our frustration and anger and different things, right? But we need to realize that it's about more than that, right? Because sure, you get your gym session and say it's an hour, right? You have 23 hours left in that same day, right? There has to be more. We have to be working on more than just that. You know what I mean? So, when we think of physical health, yeah, we need to make sure that we have some component, I feel, that has that movement in it, right? It can be fun. It doesn't have to be a formal, hey, I have these 5 sets of exercises, I'm going to do these, and that means this. Do a class, dance in your basement, whatever it is, just get the energy flowing, right? Sometimes when we commit too much to something, it becomes too much of a task, right? And something to just check off the list. So we need to make sure we're having fun at the same time, right? I think more men, we need to give ourselves permission to have some fun too.
Hmm.
So I want to toss that in there. Um, the second component of us and of wellness and its overall definition, as I've seen it, is tackling our mental health, right? Now, first off, I know that when the word, even the 2 words together, mental health, it kind of, sometimes it irks something within us, right? To think mental, are you implying that something's off? No one wants to feel like there's something wrong with them, right? So I find that's often a sticking point that turns people, from our community, man, it turns us away, right? We don't want to hear another problem that we have, You know what I mean? So I find that, we kind of shut that conversation down, but it's very real for us, right? We're human and we have a lot of different ecosystem factors that are impacting us all the time, right? So, we have a lot of things like stress that are just built up in our body, right? We have a lot of anxiety, right? We have a lot of depression, and a lot of us have kind of normalized this behavior because we kind of just see it like, majority of people are dealing with this, so this must be normal. It must be okay. Let me just suck it up and get through it, right? And that's not the case. It just so happens that a lot of us are kind of being pressed, all in the same ways and, obviously from different angles and stuff like that. But we're living with these as sort of normal things, right? And so we overlook them. We overlook the need to address it. Sometimes we don't even have the time. We don't feel like we have the time, energy, resources to actually tackle it, right? So it's just like, all right, something I'll do tomorrow. And then, because of these states of stress and anxiety and depression, that can lead us into this very big snowball that ultimately ends up with days, months, years passing by, and we still haven't gone to this thing, right? It's always being shoved down further and further to the bottom of the list. So, I think that needs to be factored in and something we need to keep in balance when it comes to considering our wellness, right? Third one is emotional and social, right? So do we have healthy relationships that we can lean into, right? Many of us, we come from a lot of different patterns that have been the result of us having our trust violated by people who are very near and dear to us, right? And that can come in several different forms, right? So we need to make sure that we have spaces where we feel safe, where we don't need to be the alpha or carry the load or whatever. We can actually receive, right? And that's a very unfamiliar and uncomfortable feeling for us, right? We think, nah, man, I got to do it all alone. I'm gonna carry this whole thing up the mountain and back myself. We need to really make sure that we surround ourselves and believe ourselves deserving of these healthy relationships, right? I think as we're maturing and, going through different life stages and stuff like that, we have different views around this, right? The importance of relationships outside of, say, partnerships that we have, right? With say, a wife or a husband. So we need to make sure that we're actually building our network and continuing to cultivate this at all times, right? Because people, including ourselves, are always evolving, right? And we need to make sure that we are monitoring our energy in terms of input and output at all times, right? Because we got to be looking out for number one, which is ourselves. Otherwise, we can't be any good to anybody else, right? From those emotional and social healthy relationships, we have a space where we can actually express feelings, right? And feelings, I know, are a very hard or, a challenging thing for us to express, right? Some of that ties into vocabulary. Some of that ties into codes of silence that we've been encouraged to have within our families when something goes wrong, right? Some things could just be observed. Hey, when this man spoke out about this, and this, he seemed to be publicly executed. So no, I don't want to talk about that myself. I don't want to seem weak or whatever it is, right? So, a lot of that I feel is tied to a lot of outdated programming that we have within us. And if we don't have a social system where we can go and actually talk about these things out loud, we can't hear how outdated and sometimes ridiculous and skewed and unfair to ourselves these things actually are, right? So having these relationships helps us to actually disrupt that, right? And I think some of us need to disrupt it because, if we're just all in our head all the time, not depending on anybody, nothing else can get in there. So we get stuck in these loops and they go around, round, round. All of a sudden, 10 years have passed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
The fourth component of wellness, as I see it, is, it ties into our sexual health. Right now, sex is something that benefits everybody, right? But, I posted something recently around us and, our expression of, our sexual energy and things like that, right? And it comes down to mindfulness, in my opinion. I don't know, Lenny, if you can relate, but, during the heyday of, being a single young man trying to, as everyone encourages us to go sow our wild oats and all that, sometimes let's be real about it. It's just whoever wants to toss that thing at us, we're going to take it. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I'm guilty of it sometimes, but I also pride myself in having turned down more than I ever received, right? And the premise of that was considering the energy that this person comes with, right? Because it only came to me later on in life that sex is actually an energy exchange, right? So in an exchange, you get and you give, right? So if we're not aware of all the different states of this person, we might be taking on some additional things on top of the challenges we're already facing, compounding all the challenges we gotta now champion. And now this mountain seems even more impossible to climb. You know what I mean? So I think a big part of it though is us being proactive about our sexual health, because a lot of us, especially as men, we tie a lot of our value and our sense of purpose in our ability to procreate and, seem kind of alpha in certain situations, right? I think we need to kind of shift up how we do this and, lean more into, hey, instead of having this expectation around, hey, we should be having sex 3, 4 times a week. As I remember when I was growing up, there always used to be all these stats around how much sex everyone's supposed to have in their relationships, and I'm like, who's having that much sex? I wouldn't even have time for that much sex right now, right? Like straight up. And so understanding that there's no one size fits all. Like we literally need to connect with ourselves and think about what are my needs, right? I think a practice that often happens, especially in our brown cultures, there's this expectation, a expectation, if you will, around women just sort of needing to perform their wifely duties whenever the man wants to, that feeling, right? And so oftentimes we have a skewed idea because we're taking in, say, studies and we're watching a lot of porn and we have different expectations around how sex even looks, right? How long we're supposed to perform and all these things, which then bleed back into our anxiety and all these stressors and things like that. So
Yeah,
now all of a sudden, this place where we could have been experiencing some release and, all of that movement of energy, now all of a sudden that becomes another source of stress. So we're not even fully present. It's just like, damn, am I big enough? Was that long enough? Is she satisfied? All these things. And again, we kind of tend to live in our head versus ask these questions out loud. Right.
yeah,
So sometimes we need to ask it out loud. We need to ask our partners this and that. We need to ask ourselves,
right,
what is it that I need out of this sexual encounter or experience? Right. And I think we also need to get better at verbalizing, out loud, as right or wrong as we feel about it. How many times do I want to have sex a week? I don't know how many people effectively communicate within their relationship, be that dating or marriage or whatever it happens to be, about how much sex they actually want to have. Oftentimes I find it's just this expectation. Then it's like, oh damn, you didn't know my needs, even though I didn't communicate them. Oh, I'm disappointed. I'm gonna withdraw. And then we just bleed into this snowball of other things, and then all of a sudden, what the hell happened? Right? So
yeah.
I think that's one. And we can work backwards on that, right? We can understand how these things would impact us if we don't tackle them, right? And address them and have open conversation around it. The final component to wellness, I feel, is lifestyle, right? Some people might be like, oh, diet, right? It might be like diet. But, when we hear diet, we think about restriction, we think about sacrifice, all of these things, right? So, many of us can do anything for a period of time. But when it comes to that consistency and that daily habitual building of good habits to support ourselves, right? Sometimes we struggle with that. So I think it has to come down to us asking ourselves, what is it that we're expecting out of our bodies and out of our time here on earth, right? Leaning into our purpose and understanding that this vessel is only as good as we allow it to be, right? So, for example, I'm over 2 years having given up alcohol. I just saw that as something that was kind of giving me a little bit more work on the back end to do. Thank you, bro. Then actually serving me moving forward, right? So I said, all right, let's do away with this one, right? When it comes down to my eating habits, right? I happen to go vegan in 2020, right? January 1st, 2020. And, still to this day, people come, they feel up my muscles. It's like they think I inflated myself before I walked in the room because they're like, how the hell does a vegan look like you and perform like you and have all this muscle and stuff, right? So it opened up very interesting conversations because I myself never had a space where I could go and be like, you're vegan? So everything I was reading about, everything me and the gym bros talked about before, during, and after the workout, we could have allowed for an alternative truth to also exist, right? So it's about thinking about that, right? All the different things that maybe are giving us a little bit more homework to do when we already don't have enough time to get done what's already on our plate, right? So seeing how all of that builds together and how we need to have all of that in balance and constantly be checking in with it. I feel like that's kind of wellness. And how does that land with you, man, and your understanding of it and even your own personal practices around, how you've approached wellness?
So, from what I'm hearing, like the lifestyle one, it I was just like, what could that be possibly? And then as you went into it and explained, it's not just about good habits and healthy habits, it sounds
Right.
like, because that is a part of it, but it's also being open to what else is out there to improve your lifestyle. Like for you, it was things like veganism and, sobriety and stuff like that. Like these are things like I should probably consider. It may or may not work for me, but um I just don't think we should like shut ourselves off to like what else is out there because it could potentially be a major boost to your life, right? As it as you've said, it worked for you, you know. Um, but yeah, that's really cool. I think like those five components that you broke it down in, that was like amazing. Like I feel like that encompassed like everything I was kind of thinking, but now it's like organized in my head, and like these are like the components, and like I feel like I didn't even consider sexual health because we have things like porn and all of that is so toxic, and it like kind of it sends us down this downward spiral. Like we set up unrealistic expectations for ourselves, then we get insecure, and then that builds anxiety, and then when we think about that we're not good enough, so that builds depression. And it's like that's just one example. Like each of these components, you can go down
Yep.
that same downward spiral in that same way, right? Like, or physical health, like if you gain weight you're unhealthy, you get diabetes, like, oh damn, I'm unhealthy, I'm sad, now you're depressed, and now you have anxiety because you don't know what the future lies with your health. All those components that you said, you can spiral to some degree, and it's important for us to be cognizant of like how do we keep ourselves in check in different ways,
Yep.
because it affects us, but it also affects our relationships with our partners. It affects our connections with our family members, our
Yeah.
friends. You know what I mean? Like it
Sure.
doesn't just affect you; it affects others around you too.
For sure, man. And when we get to express our rationale, right? It's one thing to do it internally and make a decision, right? But when we express our rationale out loud, even if it's just to ourselves, we can often pick apart some of these holes within our own logic, right? And we can often be our own best advice giver, right? I often find that, say for example, Lenny, you come to me and you tell me, hey, bro, yo, I'm going through this, man. Like, what do you think I should do? Right? I could probably give you some real sound advice, right? But if I'm struggling with that, I might be looking outward and be like, oh man, like, should I go Dr. Google, ChatGPT? What should I do? But sometimes when we actually hear the advice that we would give to others, that's often the best advice we ourselves can absorb, right? So once again, it comes back to one of the components, right? That social bit, right? Because if we have a space where we feel open enough to share these things and talk about them and allow for ourselves to be wrong, right? I can't tell you, man, one practice that has helped me so much when I go into any type of conversation is I actually give a disclaimer at the beginning. I'm like, look, I'm open to being wrong,
Give
right?
yourself grace.
100%, right? Because it's like, yo, we're lifelong learners, right? As long as we're breathing, there's still time on the clock, right? There's something we can learn from everybody if we give ourselves a chance, right? So, giving ourselves that chance, that's part of our own empowerment, right? Allowing ourselves to feel the difference when we try one of these things, even if you don't think it'll be a long-term fix for you or whatever, right? There's no fix, you got to do the work. But you know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily, hey, Lenny, these 5 things work for me and all 5 are going to work for you, right? But not robbing ourselves prematurely of these opportunities to actually explore these things will definitely take us a lot further than we've allowed ourselves to go historically so far, I think.
Yeah, for sure. That actually led into my next question.
Okay, perfect.
And basically, my next question was about how important is community support and this aspect of brotherhood.
Mhm.
Um, because you mentioned it a little bit, but this is stuff that, like, yes, there is a lot of internal work and self-development that you can do on your own, but how important is it to have that either brotherhood or just community support in general, like when you're going through this kind of wellness journey?
You know what? It's important at any point in life, man. I think that I've really gotten to think about this a lot for myself in the last year, and how I've shown up in certain relationships and just in empowering myself with, some good community members around me so that I could lean on them as well, not just be the one that gets leaned on. Right. So, it's huge. It's so, so important, man. And, I don't know if anyone who's watching, or Lenny, I don't know if you enjoy one of these guilty pleasures, but, say, for example, the show Married at First Sight. Have you ever seen
I,
that show?
I've seen every episode.
we
Actually,
just
they had a Philadelphia season,
did they?
and I was in the background in one of the episodes.
Were you really?
Ye-
Oh man,
Yeah, I was at a bar with a couple of my friends, and you could see me in the background, like
that is
just
so cool. Wow,
yeah.
we
Actually,
sit
one of my
among
friends,
TV
Luke,
royalty
was on
right
it.
now.
What's
That's
that?
hilarious. We sit among TV royalty right now.
Well, my friend Luke was actually on that season.
No way. Okay, got to go back and watch that. But to that point, it's funny that I'm so glad that you know the show because last night we just finished Australia, the most recent season, and throughout it, there's so many different moments that help you to see the importance of having someone outside of your partnership as a sounding board, as support, right? As opportunities for you to actually interrupt your own thought patterns. And I find that it's important for everybody to have people outside of the relationship because sometimes it's not in every relationship, right? But there are those times where people are wrong about what they're saying about us, right? And if we don't step outside of that relationship from time to time to get a little inside, a little feedback from the outside world, right? We don't have new thoughts to introduce to ourselves, right? Chances are, especially as men, we're just going to go into this, oh shit, I'm defeated. I messed up. Okay, cool. I'm going to just whatever, happy wife, happy life. Let me lean into whatever she said, right? For different reasons, we don't necessarily feel comfortable challenging certain things that might come up in a relationship, for example, right? So we need those spaces where we can do that. And oftentimes, especially as men and men of color, we go to the barbershop, right? That's where we're going to talk our shit.
Yep.
We're going to feel good. And we're going to have our own version of a code of
Yep.
silence there, right? That's going to feel like a safe space, right? Where we could have been like, oh, nah, man, yo, the old lady, nah, she's wrong on that one, right? But you need a space to even consider that, right? And if we don't have anything outside of ourselves, we might not ever get there,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Now, on top of that, we need to see that it's safe for us to actually ask for help, right? This was something you and I have talked about, over time as well. It's like, do we feel safe enough to ask for help? Or do we feel that the moment we do that, all of a sudden we're a lesser man, we're a lesser human, we're weak, we can't be depended on, all of these different things, right? All these things play in our minds. So I think we need to be vulnerable. And it's not that every space is going to meet us with the stuff we're seeking, but we have to seek it in order to actually find it, right? So we need to find spaces where we prove to ourselves that it is safe to open up and talk and have real relationships, right? I think that, something I've seen myself struggle with is oftentimes as we get older, we lean into, okay, I got to be this professional. I'm a husband now, I'm a dad, all these things, right? So those things take priority over everything, right? And then all of a sudden, we don't make time for the friends. The friends is usually the one that gets cut out. And then we don't realize how much pressure that ultimately puts on the people who are within our daily ecosystem, right? There's a movement that I saw, and there are some t-shirts that went with it, and it basically says, she's not your therapist, right? And that's very true, right? Sometimes we do away with all our friends. I've done this before, and it's just like, no, I'm all in. This relationship is all that matters to me, right? And it honestly, as good as that might feel initially, over time, that's a big thing for one person to carry,
Yeah.
right? They got to take care of themselves. They got to guide you on how to show up for them. They got to see, are you showing up for the people who you're responsible for now? All of these things, right? It just compounds. So we need things and relationships outside of our go-tos, right? Like the ones that sort of just naturally happen because of the way we've chosen to live our life. And, this is where we get to learn, right? This is where we get to be humbled, right? Sometimes we need that big bro to be like, you're wrong,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes we need that different messenger because, if the missus is saying you're wrong, you might be, for a variety of reasons, just want to be combative and be like, no, I'm not,
Yeah.
right? But
She
if
always says
big
I'm
bro
wrong,
comes in,
but she says I'm wrong about everything.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
So if big bro comes in, he's not invested in the situation, but he's going to tell you, I'm telling you for your own good, you're wrong. That's where we get to learn and grow,
Yeah.
right? So, we need to have these spaces. And, socially, like I mentioned earlier, we need to also have some fun, right?
Yeah.
Let's go join a team. Let's go do a class that, we know we're going to suck at, but for whatever reason, it's been on our heart to go have some fun and try it
Yeah.
out, right?
Definitely.
Like we got to be okay with sucking at something at the start, right? Because otherwise, there's going to be so few things that we actually dabble in or go and explore, right? Like who's immediately great at anything, right? So that's how I see it, man. We gotta have energy coming back to us and that safe space where we can receive too, right? It also provides an opportunity for us to show that we have value outside of what we've traditionally set up as our day-to-day routine, right? We might be having some intimate conversations with this brother over here and, give some new insight here, learn a new tip here, all these different things, right? So it's good for our soul and it's good for the people we return home to, right? In a way, it's interesting because us prioritizing a bit of a social life or whatever for ourselves, kind of by way of doing it, gives permission to those around us to do it as well, right? And I see this. It's almost like a chess game in relationships sometimes. It's like, shoot, I know I really want to see my girls, but if I do that, then, I don't know, how's he going to feel? So now I'm not going to see my girls, right? Like we need to take once again that pressure off of anybody else, be it our partner or even ourselves, and say it's all right for me to go and do this, right? That can be
Mm.
part of what makes me happy too. It doesn't just have to be this. All right, wake up, grind, do the dishes, take care of home responsibilities, go to bed, rinse, repeat. You know what I mean? So that's how I feel about that. And I'm curious, man. Like, how has community and brotherhood and whatnot shown up for you? And how has it supported you in your own development? And what have you noticed about
I
it?
mean, I could provide so many different examples, but like career is probably like the first one that comes to mind and probably the most recent for me.
Yeah,
I was just kind of at like this confusing point where I felt stuck. Um, I needed some help. I needed to like not just like text, but not even call. Like I needed to hop on like a Teams or a Zoom meeting
yeah,
with like these people that can give me some objective advice, maybe some things I don't want to hear but need to hear, and that's the only way I can like improve and grow and develop. And it's helped me so much having that kind of brotherhood and support from the community to just tell you like, dude, you need to tighten up your shit, or hey, you got to change like this or that, or hey, like, you're getting too comfortable, you know?
hmm
And it's like, I don't know if I would get that advice from anybody else. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it goes back to just like what you said, like, your boys are going to tell you what's up.
yeah,
You know what I mean? It's because they care about you, but like I think sometimes as men we need that like cold hard truth, and
yeah,
it hits different, it hits hard, but it gets through, the message comes through. And like I think once you do accomplish it, and then like for instance, I did accomplish a lot of the goals that like I talked about with my boys, and like when I come back to them and like give them an update, they're so happy, and
mm,
like they're
oh,
proudful that like they could help, right?
yeah,
Like just as a man, right? Like it shows their leadership in some ways, right? And so it's
absolutely,
like it's a win-win for everyone. So
absolutely,
that's like the biggest example. And I mean I think that how it went down, it's not only just career, it could go about just about anything you want to talk about,
for sure.
so yeah, like they've been able to create a safe space for me to do
Mm,
that, and trust, I trust them a lot. So
absolutely,
huge,
man.
huge for me because it makes me not feel alone. Like I think getting that kind of advice from like my family, or you know they're not in my shoes really. They
Yeah,
can't really relate either. So it's
yeah,
like, yeah, they give me advice because they care so much, but like I need some like cold hard facts on like how can I be better,
yeah, for
so
sure.
yeah,
And
yeah. And
that's super important that you said that, man,
uh,
about the boys and like the message coming from them, right? Because, that's a big thing. And, I don't know if you can relate to this, but, sometimes we miss the message because we're too hung up on the messenger, right? Like, and then it's all of a sudden like, because these are the usual figures you see, it's like, oh, shoot, you know what you're telling me right now is just straight criticism. It's not for my best good. It's because you want to take a jab at me. But then you go hear from your boy, you hear the exact same thing. It's like, oh, I'm all ears. Okay, please tell me, right? So, having these ecosystems that we create for ourselves allow us to actually have different messengers often convey the same message, right? It's just that sometimes it clicks and
yeah,
sometimes it doesn't, right?
yeah, and everybody has their own way of wording and communicating, and some communication styles hit you like they come through to you better than others. It just that we're human, we're so complex like that. But and another
Yeah.
thing you mentioned was vulnerability, and like that was one of my questions to you too, because very recently I had one of my friends reach out, and I was like, "Hey man, what's up? Like, are you okay?" And he was like, "Not really." And I
Mhm.
was like, "Hey man, like I'm here to talk. We're texting, but
Yeah.
when I say talk, I'm like, give me a phone call. I'm down to FaceTime even if you want.
Right.
I'll go on Zoom or Teams. I don't care. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, but he was like, "Thanks, I just don't normally do this," and blah blah. And I'm like, "Well, I'm here whenever you need." And he just never really hit me up.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, this is like the second time over the past few years he's done this, and I'm sure there's so many other men that struggle with this. Like, why is it so hard for men to be vulnerable and reach out and like just talk about what's going on with them? Like, I don't. I'm kind of confused by that a little bit, you know.
I
And
hear
this
you,
is just
man. Yeah.
like an opinionated question, you know.
Of course, yeah. No, for sure. Vulnerability is such a big one, right? I think there's so many different directions that the conversation often goes when it comes to vulnerability, right? But I just want to share a little story with you before we jump in. At one of our men's retreats that I did back when we had our space in Innisfil, right? I remember we were sort of wrapping up and we had a little extra time. So we kind of just sat in circle and we were just having an open conversation, right? And the way I saw it is like, okay, whatever we didn't happen to address in the formal portion of the retreat, now we have an opportunity to just sort of freestyle, right? Certain things might have been awakened as we went through our program for the day. So hey, let's open it up, Q&A type thing, right? And I'm looking around the room, and I could tell the guys like they want to crack it open with something because we're all dealing with something, but they didn't know how to start, right?
Mm,
So I'm like, okay, you know what? Let me start, and let me be vulnerable about something that I've never shared out loud before, right? So I told them, I'm like, all right, guys, look, I want to be real about something. You know, anytime I've walked into a sex shop, I've felt incredibly small and uncertain of myself. My confidence goes out the window because I look at these replicas of things that apparently mimic reality. And I don't look like this thing. I don't look like this strap-on thing. Like this is not what I bring to the table. So I told them that. I'm like, yo, I'm incredibly insecure when I walk in there. I've wondered so many times, can I ever please a woman? Am I big enough? Am I too big? Like, what's the deal? Right? And they burst out laughing, right? All of them burst out laughing. And then they started to share, bro, I feel the exact same way. Right? Like this is
yeah,
ridiculous, right? And then that just cracked it open and we got into talks around insecurities and fears and what's been marketed to us as like, typical men, what you're supposed to be, blah, blah, blah. Right? So it cracked it open, but they needed to see and hear a real example of someone who they imagined didn't have these fears or insecurities come to the table and be like, yo, actually that's what's lurking beneath the surface. Right? Like I think we just need to see spaces like that because, if I take it back and I examine it outside of that, I think about the men in my life, right? All the different men who have been in my world, and I haven't really seen them be vulnerable. There's one or two, right? But a lot of them, they shy away from that so hard.
mm,
They run in the opposite direction so fast, man. And honestly, they're not fooling anybody. Like, everyone in the room knows, no matter what you say, even if you say you're fine right now, we can all see it. We can sense it within your energy of you. Like, look at you right now. Like, if you saw you right now, you would know something was up, right? So, feeling safe enough to be vulnerable is such a big one, right? And oftentimes, as men, as the general, I'm just going general here, right? We don't necessarily know how to receive an invitation to be vulnerable, right? Let alone extend that to somebody, right? So again, this comes back to us and be like, all right, what are my blocks when it comes to being vulnerable? Why don't I want to talk about me feeling depressed right now or me feeling anxious or really overwhelmed at work or whatever it is, right? Do we not want to feel like we're complaining? Do we think that, oh, this is first world problems? What are we saying, right? What are we telling ourselves? What's the story we tell ourselves, right? So, in being vulnerable, I've just seen it as something that's often weaponized against men, right? And this is not just by men, this is by women too. I'm gonna keep it real, right? And this is something that can happen to anybody, right? This is not just a men on the receiving end type of deal. We do this to each other too,
yeah.
right? But I often find if we pay attention when, say, Lenny, you want to be vulnerable with me, and if I'm just like, ha,
I
feelings,
was just
bro, come
thinking
on,
that.
man, like, come on. But like, you could see the hurt in their eyes. You could see the, oh my God, he's doing what I wish I had the strength to do, but like, I feel so uncomfortable right now. So let me try and distract us with something,
Yeah,
right? I think it just takes that one within every ecosystem to come to the forefront, much like you're doing right now, right? You're trying to be that safe space for your buddy, like to talk about what he's going through, right? We need to just feel comfortable. It again comes back to us as a starting point, right? Self mastery, I believe, is the way. That's our starting point for everything, right? But we need to understand that not everyone's going to receive our vulnerability the same way, right? My vulnerability might be showing up as strength for you, but to someone else, it's showing up as weakness. And I have to accept that, right? I think I was expecting, okay, I want to be vulnerable, but there's always going to be someone who says something, so maybe I shouldn't be vulnerable. Nah, you're discounting, and now you're doing a disservice to those people who are actually showing up and actually value what you're doing right now, because they're seeing a cycle broken in front of them. They're seeing, how can I do this in front of me, right? And it's a very foreign concept to so many of us, right? We don't
Yeah.
even practice this within the home. So we need to have a bit of compassion for ourselves and the people we're trying to offer this compassion up to, right? And it's going to take some time, and not everyone has the time and energy to sign up to walk everybody through this and be, hey, Sophia, and be that learning space, right? That's not a pressure that we can put on everybody, right? They
Mhm.
have to be willing to do that, and they can probably only do it up to a certain point, right? But seeing it, putting ourselves in spaces where we can hear conversations, go look up some podcasts with vulnerable men talking about their feelings, right? Let's do that, right? If you don't know people who you can call up and be like, hey, bro, 10 minutes of vulnerability, give it to me, go, right? Like it doesn't happen that way, right? We got to set the stage. There's a massaging of the whole thing that happens, right? But, a big part of it too, Lenny, I got to be real with you, man, when it comes to being vulnerable and expressing ourselves and stuff like that, is we tend to not lean into the vocabulary and the proactive learning of this vocabulary so we can effectively express ourselves, right? Oftentimes, think about it, when we talk to our boys, Andrew Tate, yeah, I'd love to hear more on what you're thinking about Andrew Tate, and we can definitely dive into that. Appreciate you, Sarah, and hey, Healing Color. And so what I find is that we have this gap when it comes to vocabulary. As men, we might just be like, oh, bro, what? You sad? Right? Are you sad? You angry? You mad? Like, usually that's what we do to each other. And when we say sad, it's like, okay, we're going to give you this option, but don't pick that one, boy, because I'm coming at you if you pick that one, right? So oftentimes it's just like we're usually just angry or frustrated or sad, right? We don't know how to communicate that though. It's just sort of labels that have been put on us, and it's like, okay, I guess that's what it is, right? So we need to be really proactive about language, right?
Yeah.
Because language allows us to free what's in us from within and get it out, right? And so we can actually explore that and think about it, right? When I can say, yo, Lenny, bro, I'm feeling sad because, I really feel inadequate at work. I got this promotion, and even though that should be the best thing in the world, I feel really shit and unqualified, and I really don't know if I can do this, man, right? Oh, wow.
I
Whoa,
can
what
I
the hell
can
just
totally
happened?
relate.
And so it's like, oh, okay, we had a bunch of language in there, but that
Yeah.
empowered me to be vulnerable and now to communicate to my brother Lenny. And now my brother Lenny feels seen and not like he's not alone. So wow, within that little bit there, look how much we were able to do, right? So whether it's about an expression of vulnerability or just how we show up in everyday life in every scenario, empowering ourselves to be proactive about enhancing and expanding our vocabulary will take us a lot further than we probably give it credit for, right? Then we can explore those feelings and not just be like, oh, I hate that label. No, no, we're not going to do that one, right? We can actually be like, oh, a little bit maybe, but I'm also feeling this, right? So, that's what I've seen, man. Like, what have you seen in terms of the hiccups and the different hurdles that you or maybe some of your people have faced when it comes to expressing vulnerability?
Um, I would say like they just struggle with even just having conversations, or meeting face to face, or even doing what we're doing like virtually face to face. I just feel like a lot of my either friends or like guys that I've talked to, they struggle with it. But when I was in Miami, I was actually part of a men's circle. They called it the Men's Leadership Collective, and they still have
Love it.
it. They do it once a week where a group of men get together and they either discuss a topic or somebody goes over like something that's going on with their life, and it's like a vulnerable
Wow.
safe space for people. And the guy who hosts it, he's like, MMA fighter, like huge, like super jacked, like, man's man, like beard out here,
Yeah.
like, like he's just like the most like manly man you could think of, right? Like alpha
Okay.
guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's the one who's creating the space to be like, let's be vulnerable. Let's like, you know, support each other. Let's like, it's okay to be emotional. I
Right.
think coming from someone like him helped people open up a lot more,
Yeah. Got you.
and there was other guys that were like him that joined in. There's other guys that are like the polar opposite of him that joined in. I was in there. It was just like we all like kind of accepted and supported each other, and we didn't judge. We didn't make fun of each other about things. We didn't crack jokes and act like we're better than the other guy or something. Like we were all genuinely there to help, and I try my best to like tell my friends and let them know,
Hmm.
like, hey, you guys can reach out to me anytime. Like, when my friend reached out to me, he was like, I normally don't do this often. I'm like,
Right.
that's totally fine. Like, you can trust me. Like, it's between us. Like, if
Mhm.
you need a vent, I'm here. Things like that.
Okay.
Um, so I just try my best to like kind of make sure that it's known, And
Mhm.
I also, in turn, I just be vulnerable with them.
Right.
Some
Right.
most of the time without asking, because I think when they see my vulnerability, it kind of lets them feel safe to be vulnerable too back with me. Maybe not right away,
100%.
but eventually, maybe at some point, they're like, Lenny like really shares a lot with me. Like, let me like hit him up and see like what he thinks about what's going on in my life.
For sure, man. It sounds like they see in you what you saw in this guy who was leading those events that you were going to, right? Like, it's
He's
this
still
guy,
doing it
you
too.
know,
He's still
yeah,
doing it.
that's incredible.
And
No, that's so
he does it out in Miami where
wow.
bravado is like a huge thing,
Yeah,
dude. To be machismo and like, you know what I mean? That whole culture of like being hyper masculine,
yeah,
like it can be toxic,
for
and
sure.
he's like really breaking that stigma. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, man, because it makes me think about sort of the recording industry for a second, if you will, right? Like sometimes we see what gets spins, right? It's the violence and the women, the drugs, blah blah blah,
Yeah.
right? But what I see is like sometimes we understand that in order for us to have a platform where people can actually resonate with what we're saying, we almost need to do certain things and find ourselves in certain spaces, right? So as you said, MMA. Okay, now I'm gonna be that guy who could probably take on one gorilla all by myself, right?
Yeah.
Right? And now you come back and you've shown what you can do, but now you're going to be this other thing. There's this other dynamic to you, right? So it's almost like sometimes I feel we need to do this checklist of like I'm ultimate blah blah blah, and then if we ever get there, then we can peel it back a little bit,
Yeah.
right? But I'm so glad that you lead the way that you do, man. And are you a big Sean fan by any chance?
Uh oh yeah, I love Big Sean. Yeah, great
All
rapper, dude.
right. Well, yeah, he is. I love the intention behind a lot of the things he says. And 2 points on Big Sean. I love his song Deep Reverence with Nipsey.
Hmm.
And the reason I love it is there's actually a portion of that song where he talks about, in school they taught us all these things, but no one taught me how to deal with depression and anxiety, which were closing in from all sides and left me feeling like I wanted to kill myself, right? And so, I thought that was huge. And I think that if more people maybe, give that song a spin, listen to the lyrics, dissect them a little bit, I think they can see themselves a lot in it and see the need, maybe the call to action for themselves, for them to really start tackling some of this wellness and the different, challenges that they need to champion. A second thing about Big Sean is I actually read his book Higher that he put out. He put that out, I believe, earlier this year. And one thing that I think might make a big difference when it comes to vulnerability, right? Not only with ourselves, but maybe with our ecosystem. He talked about having agreements that he made with himself, right? So he checks in with these agreements to make sure that he's staying on track and true to himself, right? So, I'm thinking, it almost sounds like there were unspoken agreements that existed between you and everyone else who attended these events in Miami around how you're going to show up for one another and for
Yeah.
yourself, right? So I think maybe if we even leaned into a little bit of that about making some agreements with ourselves. You don't ever have to show these to anybody, but making them with yourself so that you can hold yourself accountable, right? Even having these agreements within your ecosystem of close friends and be like, yo, bro, like, just so we can tighten this thing up and we can truly grow and evolve and allow space for everybody to feel safe here. Why don't we have a little bit of a code of conduct for ourselves, just so that we're helping one another to keep rising higher and higher, in our day-to-day interactions. You know what I mean? That's what I think would go a long way in case these are sort of unspoken codes that we have in these spaces already. Verbalizing it once again might go a long way in helping us open up the vulnerable spaces.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks. And you said the track name was Big Sean featuring Nipsey Hussle, Deep Reverence.
Deep reverence, yeah.
Okay, nice. I'm probably gonna post it on my story later.
Yeah, it's a great track.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that'll go a long way, man. And thank you for showing up as you do for other men and for yourself.
Yeah,
You're
definitely.
not only trying to be it for other people, but you're walking it. And I think that's first and foremost the most important thing you can do if you're trying to impact your own life and other people's
Thanks,
lives.
man. I appreciate it. And like, I'm just gonna give you back some flowers too. Like, I just appreciate that you chose this as a career path. This isn't even just like a lifestyle, things that you believe in and passionate about. Like, this is what you do. Like, I feel like honestly, like this was what you were meant to do.
Thank
Like,
you.
just the way you talk about it, your knowledge, like how you go about like kind of growing and evolving, it feels like it just comes so natural to you. Like, this is what you were meant to do. You know what I mean?
Thank
And
you.
it's just rare to see that for me as like a Guyanese man. I feel
Hmm.
like it's super rare because we're typically in a corporate office just like you used to be.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm still in that setting. There's nothing wrong with that. But there
Oh,
has to
no.
be some kind of balance, man. There's like life outside of that. You know,
Yes,
there's yourself outside of just what you are doing for like your marriage or your relationship. And I think oftentimes if we lose sight of that, like we said earlier, you can spiral, you know? And we talk about it a lot in that men's circle I was telling you about when I was out in Miami, you know, um, how we have spiraled at some point in our life, you know, and how do we manage that, and how do we prevent it and get better and be
yeah,
happier, you
yeah,
know?
for
Yeah,
sure.
man.
I appreciate that,
So
man.
we
Thank you.
we almost have like an hour, 5 minutes left, and then we'll have a full hour. But before like I wrap this up, like, can you just tell us about like what you do, like what is your services, your offerings, things like that? Like, how can men reach out to you and either seek help or get advice or whatever it may be?
For sure. I appreciate the opportunity to do that, man. And, I just want to say, before I jump into that, if at some point, maybe on your story or something like that, if we could share, how people could get in contact with that gentleman who's doing stuff out in Miami, just in case you have any listeners who happen to be in the area and that really spoke to them, that way they can connect and reach out to something that can speak to them. I think that'd be important,
Yeah,
man.
I'll find out because they're actually not on social media. They
Okay.
do all of this like off social media,
Gotcha.
like in private, in like an encrypted group chat, and
Gotcha.
that's how they organize and like
Gotcha.
do things.
Love it.
So I can find out like how it maybe they can reach out to him directly, you
Absolutely.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, man. So, yeah, so as I mentioned, Healing in Color is the space that my wife and I have co-created. And so our services, even though we were first based in Innisfil, now we are traveling the world. So all of our services, we are offering them in person if we happen to be there. And, just to share a little bit about why you might want to connect with us at Healing in Color. As I mentioned, my wife comes from a tremendous background of being in service to the community, having worked in the school board, has been in service to as a child and youth care worker. So, she's very much been boots on the ground in terms of understanding kids and the home ecosystem and the importance of everyone in a household doing the work in order to support effective outcomes. So, mindfulness is definitely at the very core of what we do and trying to empower everybody with that. So, if anyone wants to visit, our Healing in Color account, so that's at Healing in Color, and it's a U in there. That's the Canadian spelling. And then my personal account is the Self Mastery Consultant. So a big service that I lead with is self mastery consulting. Okay. Now, self mastery consulting, what that's about, as we've talked about several points in this conversation, it's about having an opportunity for us to actually reflect back and understand what sort of things do I need to champion within myself in order to show up effectively, right? This comes from having been in all these corporate spaces and seeing ineffective leadership and seeing that at the root of that ineffective leadership is because these people could not effectively lead themselves, but they were tasked with leading others. So to me, I kept having issues with that. And when I had my opportunities to lead and manage and whatnot, I really applied my principles to it. So self-mastery consulting is us getting a chance. For example, Lenny, you come to me, it doesn't have to be in a certain setting, right? We can do it online. It can be in person at a coffee shop, over pizza, whatever, right? And you say, "Hey, Josh, bro, I'm trying to work on this, man. I identify this as something that needs some work." And then what I do is I build a customized plan for you around how we can actually start working on that, right? So that includes things that are related to diet, meditation, journaling prompts, different writing practices, things that we need to work on in terms of communication. All of these, they're custom catered to whatever it is you're coming to me for. And I see it as necessary because we all need that space where we can go for, our own personal development. Right. I know everyone online, there are a lot of folks who just sort of tout themselves as coaches, and, kudos to the coaches doing their thing and all that. But, for me, the title of consultant has meant a lot to me in my professional spaces, and it often indicates that you've had boots on the ground, working knowledge, getting your hands dirty, doing these things yourself. You have actually applied these principles and you see the rewards of that. So that's why I refer to it as self-mastery consulting. I also feel that it has less of a thing around it when it comes to people saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go for a coaching session." Oh, no, bro, I'm going for a self-mastery consulting session, bro. The language, once again, language means something, right? So people often feel seen in those sessions because it's custom catered. I'm not chat GPTing anything for you. This is very much you come to me. I'll write out the plan right in front of your face if you want me to, just to prove that I'm doing this for you. It's not something generated for you. Another thing that we do is Reiki. So Reiki is something that can be done in person or over distance. We're both Reiki practitioners, and so that's something that can bring some healing. That's really works with you on an energetic level. I know that we're kind of at the end of our program here, but if anyone wants to talk about it, we can certainly talk about it. It basically deals with there being different energy centers within our body, right? And certain blockages that happen often can be at the root of different things that we're experiencing. So examining that and working together to clear out those blockages. Okay. Another thing you can connect with me for is actually the Soul Flow podcast, Soul Flow Radio podcast. Right. That's where me and one of my brothers weekly we tackle some things that you won't often hear. Those challenging conversations around family things, this and that, and people can submit their questions that they may not feel comfortable asking in their own settings, so that we can actually dive in and explore that. Right. So that's another way. Tarot card reading is something that's fascinated me for a really long time. Kind of been practicing that behind the scenes for many years. And so I'm able to do that for you in person or online. And, I know there are going to be folks who might see tarot. They might have different notions around tarot. What I want to encourage you to do, once again, like everything else we've talked about here, is, explore it for yourself. Find yourself put yourself in some spaces where you can actually ask those questions you have before you make judgments around it. I use it as a very intentional tool for us to build our intuition, because I see intuition, which is kind of that thing within you, your Jiminy Cricket, that guiding star, that north light, whatever you want to call it. That's telling you what would serve you best. But sometimes, or oftentimes, we are encouraged to ignore that inner voice and follow a protocol or get approval from a boss or whatever it happens to be. So we don't get to see often in real life how right that intuition is and how it's actually guiding us towards what's going to set our souls on fire, right? So I use it as a tool for us to actually strengthen your intuition, because those messages that are coming out leads back to what we were talking about, Lenny. Sometimes we get too hung up on the messenger and we miss the message. Right. So with it being a story that's told through the cards, and we connect because you're telling me what's going on with you, it gets catered to what you're talking about. And at the end of the day, that's just a safe space for us to have another conversation. Right. It's a tool. It's a vehicle. Right. Now, the final one that I want to put you onto is sound healing. Right. Sound healing is something that we do, and that works in a passive way, meaning that, Lenny, you come to me, hey, Josh, let me do a sound session with you, man. Right. You get a relaxing experience that's really about you receiving. Right. And we have a whole ton of different instruments that we play, and they all have certain frequencies that really help to release different things that are deeply rooted within our bodies. Right. Now, I really like this because it can be passive. Say we're going to a traditional therapy setting. What we get out of that is what we let come out of our mouth. Right. When it comes to the sound, you don't have to speak, but those things start to come from within, right? So they start bubbling. You start getting activated about those. They come onto your awareness, right? So, sorry, I lied. One more. We do retreats. Retreats. So these can be done all over the world. Say you have a special event, we've done this, people who want to have their bachelorette, type things, we put those together for you. So it's a very customized
That
experience. Men's groups
that's
and
a cool
circles.
idea.
Thank you,
I
bro.
didn't think about that. Like a bachelorette type
Absolutely.
party. Like you can have a session with like your friends because they're all together.
Yep. And it's totally
Oh,
catered to what you guys are after, and we create that environment for you, you know what I mean? So this is something that we're willing to do all over the world. If you have an event, you want to reach out and be like, hey, what can you guys toss together for us? And how can we make this what it is we're intending? That's something that we can do as well, right? That's something that we're branching out into. And something that's coming up, just for the men out there who are looking for a safe space, like we were talking about cultivating here, is I'm actually going to start having bi-weekly men's circles that I run online, right? So that we
oh,
can have that opportunity to connect and open up and share. And sometimes if you don't even want to share, sometimes it's having the visuals of other men sharing that is going to go a long way
oh
for you.
yeah.
But, of course we encourage the participation, but sometimes we know it needs a little bit of time to massage and feel comfortable. So, that's just a little bit about what we do. We have the links in our bios so people can check that out. Discovery calls are free with us. We don't charge for those. So you can set one of those up and ask all your questions, right? We can see if it's a good fit for you, but we really pride ourselves because we come in this not trying to become rich, not thinking we got the goods and you got to pay me for it. Like we're very free flowing with all this information. You know what I mean? We just want to make sure that our people feel like, oh, wow, I see faces that look like mine in this space as well. I feel more safe to actually approach and ask my questions and possibly go further with it. So that's what I want to share with you, man.
It's amazing, dude.
Yeah,
It's
thank you.
amazing. And remind me again, where can we listen to the Soul Flow podcast?
Yep. So Soulflow, we're very much flowing with it right now. We
Right.
didn't, what we said, this was actually a practice for both of us. It's like, let's not go and invest the $10,000 in this equipment and this studio and this
Right.
background and all this. Let's flow with it. So we actually do those on Instagram Live.
Gotcha.
We do those on Thursdays. So far, we've done them at 12 p.m. Eastern. So we try to catch people on their lunch break. And then we post the recording afterwards later on in the day. So these are opportunities for people to engage and once again, see visuals like much like we're doing right now. Right. So for now, that's on Instagram Live. You can see the previous 3 episodes. We've done 3 already. They're posted on our feeds of Healing in Color and the Self Mastery Consultant. And anyone who's interested in actually jumping on, diving into some other things, they can always reach out to me and we can set up a live like we're doing right now, or we can talk about it on SoulFlow if they don't really want the visibility of it. Whatever it happens to be, man. Just this is all about creating as many safe spaces as possible for us to communicate and realize that we're not alone.
Right. That's amazing, man. Thanks so much for sharing that, and thank you for what you do. I really appreciate it. I think you're definitely making a difference for sure. You're making a positive impact on men that I feel like it's been a tough time for them lately in society. There's a lot of issues that are specifically affecting us as men. So, really happy that you're doing this, man, for
Thank you, man.
sure.
And I receive all the stuff all the amazing things you've said to me. Thank you so, so much. And thank you for showing up as you do. I see the work you're doing out there. You're planting so many seeds. You're allowing people to really think about things differently by allowing other people to have a platform as well, man. So thank you and cheering for you all the way, bro. And, I'm here. I look forward to all the other stuff that we can co-create together in the future as we build.
Yeah, for sure, man. And thanks, and have fun out there in Costa Rica.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thanks,
We're going to
guys.
post this for you shortly. And, by all means, give us your feedback. We want to hear what you thought about what we shared. If you had other questions that kind of spurred from that, leave it in the comments and we'll get back to it. Lenny, I don't know if you're down, man, but, I'm always down to do part 2, 3, 4, and we can go until forever, man. We just want to encourage everyone to make this conversation for you as well. Right. We're in service, but this is, like we said, this is as much for us as it is for you. So let's have these interesting conversations where we can champion things that have typically held us back so that we can all go to places we've never been.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
All
I
right.
I have a couple of ideas for part 2.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
I look
man.
forward to it, man.
All right, man.
All right. You have a great one and thank you again.
Thanks, you. Thanks, guys. See ya.